In 1902, Freud sent out a written invitation to 4 Jewish doctors, inviting them to come and meet here in his apartments. What would come to be known as the Wednesday Psychological Society gathered every week in his waiting room, and their first topic was a subject very close to Freud's own heart: the psychological function of smoking. A good cigar after a meal was part of bourgeois Viennese culture, but Freud took cigar indulgence to a whole new level. He smoked 20 cigars a day and considered the pleasures of the cigar a substitute for what he called the single greatest habit: masturbation. The Wednesday group discussions helped Freud to advance his ideas on sexuality, resulting in a groundbreaking publication: 3 essays on the theory of sexuality.
So what he does in this book, he introduces a concept of enlarged sexuality, because at the time sexuality was very much restricted to people having sex, whereas for Freud it's about eroticism, it's about attraction, it's about excitement and everything in between. He also sees it being at work in children.
I mean, that's very controversial, isn't it? So how does he see this sex drive, this libido developing in children?
Shortly after a child is born, it goes through an oral phase. Freud observes that when a child is being fed, that it can derive some satisfaction or gratification from that, which allows us to look at that experience as something that can be deservedly called erotic.
So he thinks he's identified this sex drive in children. In what way does he see this playing out in adult life?
It plays out insofar as it informs our sexual identity, our sexual fantasies, our sexual orientation. It informs who we are as human beings. But it's not a formula. Each and every individual has to find his or her way through this process. As a result of which, in a sense, one could say that we are all equally abnormal.
There is a possibility, though, isn't there, that he's got this all wrong, that it's not all about sex?
Yes, people have said Freud's got it all wrong, but I think if we use an enlarged concept of sexuality, we actually do come to the conclusion that a lot of our mental world is conditioned by this drive.
Freud's progressive theories of sexuality spoke to a generation of young Viennese, cynical about the church and repressive morality. But his growing popularity had its dangers. Freud feared, not without reason, that because his circle was mainly Jewish, anti-Semitism would mean that his ideas would never be fully accepted. He was anxious that psychoanalysis would be labelled a Jewish science. A solution came in the form of a Swiss Gentile from Zurich who visited him in 1907.
I was then a very young man still, and he was the old man, so I settled down to learn something first.
Carl Jung was one of the brightest young psychiatrists of the day. Freud bestowed rapturous praise on him, and in return, Jung came to revere Freud. Given Freud's antipathy to religion, it's rather ironic that his movement was beginning to look a bit like a religious cult, with psychosexuality its key doctrine, Freud its high priest, and Jung the evangelist who promote Freud's message. But the evangelist soon became a heretic. Jung reinterpreted one of Freud's key terms, libido, which Freud understood as sexual drive, to mean all mental energy. And he also took issue with what he saw as Freud's obsessive focus on the Oedipus complex.
When he had thought something, then it was settled, while I was doubting all along the line.
Their friendship ended acrimoniously, with Freud calling Jung crazy and out of his wits, while Jung's parting shot was no less provocative. Your technique of treating your pupils like patients is a blunder.
In that way, you produce either slavish sons or impudent puppies. I am objective enough to see through your little trick.
But whilst Freud faced dissent and a splintering of his movement, his name and his ideas were to reach global prominence due to a pivotal event.